Hello, my name is Kelly Blumenthal. I am the Acting Director of the IAU's Office for Astronomy Outreach, and welcome to this interview series celebrating LGBTQIA+ astronomers. This week, in honor of the UN Free and Equal and GLAAD anti-bullying campaign called Spirit Day, we are highlighting some amazing stories of perseverance and activism from queer astronomers around the globe. In this interview, you'll hear from Jessica Mink, an astronomer and software developer at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. Now, when we taped this interview, we had a lot of problems with audio. So what you'll see here and what you'll hear here is a portion of the full interview that's been spliced together to give you what we hope is the best listening experience. I'll give you a brief introduction to Jessica here, and then we'll let her speak for herself. Jessica Mink earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the United States in the 1970s. Later, while working at Cornell, Jessica was part of a team that discovered the rings of Uranus, and then when she returned to MIT, she helped discover the rings of Neptune. But of course, she's done a lot of software development too. And if you're an astronomer, you've probably used some of Jessica's work, like WCS Tools, a software package used to map positions of objects on an astronomical image to real positions on the sky. So Jessica has and continues to find new ways to improve upon her own work and build upon the tools created by others. And now I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself.
So it's pretty current still, and other people use that too. But the second package I wrote to do astrometry, I wrote in C, and it's real portable. And a lot of people just pick it up. More people than I know use it. Every once in a while, because I'm trans, and I have these packages originally under different gender and a different name, but last name. And so sometimes people who've used one of them will meet me and say, "Oh, are you related to?" And I say temporarily, not temporarily, but temporally. So and it's turned out. So I transitioned 12 years ago from male to female, and when I first started thinking about that, which was 8 years earlier, I was thinking about having a new career and doing something else I was interested in that was totally not. And but I couldn't move very fast on everything. Married, I wanted to really keep taking care of her, helping take care of her, and my job's pretty enjoyable actually. And so I sort of, and also I had a lot of health reasons to take a long time, in addition to my relationship reasons. So I knew I was going to transition in 2003, but I didn't know when. And I knew I had some obstacles. And it turned out, in the end, time was like a useful thing in the case, because acceptance changed over the years. So from 2004 and 5 on, I became part of the transgender community, which was pretty active. And there were people my age, well, actually above and below my age. At that point, I was almost 20 years younger. So, and I was in my, and so that seemed, it's sort of old, not old to transition. It's good people still do it, but that people weren't accepted when they were younger, and it was really acceptance. And I had no idea how things would go, other than have a group of friends who were engineers, not too many scientists, but engineers, and some scientists that transitioned, but people tended to stay pretty quiet, because as long as you could pass, you were okay. You could get by in your life. And, it wasn't until I think after 2010 that you could be more open. Things changed in the last 12, 15 years. Things have changed a lot as far as acceptance, where there is acceptance, and there is more practical acceptance. There's widespread. So I don't have problems in places that I've been. I've not really had problems anywhere. But I pass mostly. So that helps. And that makes a difference. My friends are varying degrees, and some of them, most of them have kept working in the jobs they already. By the time we transitioned, which was like 2009, it took more effort, but you could do it. And I transitioned in 2011. I wasn't sure, it was like this time span between 2010 and 2012, really. And I first started, I'm really in my, and the other reason I didn't transition, didn't feel in a hurry, is because gender's not my most focused identity. Being an astronomer turns out to be a big part of my identity, which I sort of knew, but it becomes more real when you have to make decisions about it. But I was a community activist. I work on open issues. I'm like notorious as a bicyclist in Boston. I've been involved for 40 years trying to make the place better, and been president of organizations, help other organizations. I've been working on bike advisory committees for Boston and Cambridge over many years, with varying degrees of effects. But I work on trails. That's my pet project. And so right now I'm president of a nonprofit that supports one trail, the southern edge of Boston. Eventually it'll be 13 miles long. Now it's, I think, I don't know, all but a couple miles are. But it took us a long time to do. I've been involved for 30 years. We're 30, our organization's 30 years old, the trail. So I've been doing things, and the trick is there's some knowledge about transitioning with family. There's about in work where there's a job and you're getting paid. Not a lot of transition in what I call the third world, but the world of volunteerism. And I had a lot of that. Like literally, that's pretty much a third of my life family, a third of my life work, a third of my life volunteer things. And I didn't know how it worked. And I sort of studied how it works. And it was getting more well known. And I was really fortunate about my job that somebody else transitioned 2 years before I did. We got before she transitioned. Not much before, but a bit before. She went faster than I did. Like she was going to transition. She did it like 6 months in. And so she sort of broke ground for me. I better know observatory at the time. And I knew a lot of people, and I wasn't even sure how I was going to do it. And so she had to do it, but on a small, work with a smaller group. And so that was interesting too. But then I also found out I was on a board of a nonprofit, and we had a retreat on inclusion and access, and we had a pretty diverse board. It was multiracial, multi-gender, half women, half men, maybe even more women. And then people of differences. So it was an interesting retreat, but we didn't have anybody who was obviously gay or trans or LGBTQ anyway. So I actually wrote a note to the president or the executive director before just in case they came up, that she would know. And so I was married still, and my spouse is still a psychotherapist and a couples counselor, actually, too. It's very interesting being married to a couples counselor and getting divorced. And you have to stay friends or else you're in real trouble. And we stayed friends. We had a daughter that, that made it. But so she would help me write the letter. And told me not to pathologize being trans, be really careful about how I said things. But I got a call back right away after she read the email that I sent. And there was no problem whatsoever. And so then I wrote a letter to the rest of the board. And I think after we had our because it didn't come up at the retreat that we had. I didn't feel like bringing it up because it was just me. And there wasn't really a problem. But I decided I'd bring it up. So I wrote, that's the only letter I wrote to people. Everybody else I told in person. But I figured the whole bunch. So this was my first time that I came out to a group. So by that time, and about that time is when I first some friends. And then that was in end of 2009. And that was when I first told some of my friends too. And they were all immediately accepted. It was like, I just didn't expect it. I had people, offering, they knew they were going to get accepted, and they were offering me a place to live. I didn't find one. I could stay with them a little bit while I was looking. Two of my best friends did that. And they're still, they were good friends, but not great. I wasn't as close to them, partly because I had this barrier between me and everybody. And, but I saw both actually, in the course of my life. We talked, and it was really nice. And so I ended up finding this group of supporting straight people, cis people, and I didn't expect, and that helped me with pretty much my whole life. And at work, I actually worked with that. Like I said, I worked with a lot of people at the observatory because I handled all the telescope proposals. And a lot of people used my software who I didn't work directly with, so I'd help them. And I ended up working on a project of digitizing the Harvard photographic astronomical plate collection because I used my software working with images and catalogs to get good positions and make the plates more usable. It was like a proof of concept thing. Then work to make that work, but on the best plates we could use it as was. And so one of those people, the curator of the plates, became one of my best friends at work, but I hadn't known her that well before, but was really supportive. She's part of the musical community, which is LGBTQ friend, and that helped. So she knew people who were trans, she knew people who were gay. So anyway, that was a big help. And in the end, what happened was I was as an astronomer, and I almost quit astronomy twice before when I needed work, and neither time did I do it. And there was so that was a big thing. So I started to tell people that I was transitioning, working my way up. So we went out as a group, my direct cop, once a month or 2 months, and I told them, and I had pictures of me, so they knew what I looked like. And they were all pretty excited. And so I worked my way up to my boss, his boss, the director of the observatory, the people I worked most closely with. And I spent actually delaying my exact transition by a couple of days because there were two people that I hadn't been able to tell yet. And one of them was the person I worked closely with, the guy I still work with, actually. And he's very, very helpful. And my associate director, he's not going to leave, are you? And I said, no. He said, good. And the director of the observatory, you have any problems, come to us, to the top people at the top, and they'll help. So, but it was interesting. So this case, I was going to do it like right after Thanksgiving, but then I had to tell a couple more people before I could do that, and they out before Thanksgiving, so I delayed a couple more days. But I had no, I wasn't on anything. So anyway, that was what I did. I transitioned to work, and it went extraordinarily smooth. And by the time I transitioned at work, I'd moved out. I'd move out and break from my spouse. My daughter was in college. We put this all off till my daughter was in college. We decided that was the right thing to do. And my spouse talked to her colleagues, and they said, the best time to do it is when your kid is been in college for enough time to she's gotten friends and has her group and her own environment. And so we did. And she didn't take it very well after that, but it worked out that way. Okay. And so it's an interesting thing to do that. But I think one of the other things I wanted to was like, you have multiple identities. You don't have just one. It's not just that might be really important, but it's not the only thing you are. And if you have problems with one of your identities getting on people's nerves or something, focus on another one for a while and realize that they're all there. And they're all part of it. That's my leadership role.
That's a really interesting take, I think, for anybody. We're all
that's what I think. It's not just if you're trans. I think it's whenever you have one thing that you're too focused on. And it's partly I'm the kind of person that focuses on multiple things, which not everybody's really good at. And I'm not always really good. But you never are. You're always multiple.
And didn't Carl Sagan say we are multitudes, we are made of multitudes, something like that?
So I had like a work transition, a professional transition, a volunteer transition, and family. And the family was hardest, probably. But, everybody else was amazing. My family was actually very supportive. And I thought they were tolerant, more supportive at first is what I thought, but then I sort of realized a lot of people aren't tolerant. and family has been tolerant. I haven't lost anybody, which is actually pretty rare for people in trans adults. So I feel pretty lucky, and I feel one of my friends who's blind, a blind astronomer, says, just you don't say lucky, you say fortunate. And so it's not just luck. Fortune is something you partly make yourself. And so I feel like I haven't had a lot of opposition that a lot of people see. And that's helped me be able to advocate, but I still don't have experience that I have. So it's different. I can say what helps or what's helped me. A lot of just keep the same thing. And I always tell people now when they ask for advice from an astronomer, just not whether they're trans or LGBT, but the trick is to find something you like to do and find a place you like to do it and where other people appreciate it. And, that is what I ended up doing. And I did it. I do it. We took a career route that looks straightforward in retrospect, in hindsight, but it's not as straightforward. Didn't feel straightforward when it was happening. And was really a part of it, but it was not a break in things. Although it did change my priorities. So anyway, that's my history. And it's based on that.
What a history. What a history it is. Thank you for sharing all that. So, I think you don't even really need me. You can do this whole interview by yourself. You answered most of the questions that I have, actually. So I think that what you shared, everything you shared, really exemplifies why we need to focus on histories within the LGBTQIA plus community, because the things that you've lived through and that you understand because of your own experiences can really help people to move through their own experiences and live their own lives. You talked about, even before we started recording, you were talking about role models and how important that is. And you touched upon that a little bit also in what you were speaking to. You talked about your experience in activism and the amazing work that you've done in and outside of astronomy, which is just so incredible. So thank you for sharing all that. And, I think maybe what we could end with is just your final thoughts, maybe focusing on the importance of role models, because I really think that is, truly what you are. You are a role model to so many people, and yet you still think that role models are really important in your life. So could you maybe drive us home with some extra
That's
thoughts?
an interesting thing. I've thought about that. Role models that I have a lot of different people that have been role models for me, historical people and people I've known and people in family. So it's been interesting. So a lot of people, I think now, a lot of the people I used to have as role models were men. And I think now I have more female role models. I've had to look sometimes harder, but not always. So like in my community activism role, I have two people I work with. My board of just work for 15 years, I guess. And the executive director and the chairman of the board, chair of the board, I guess. We're both people that really believe in working with communities and having the community develop ideas. And I think all the kinds of things that I did, not trying to impose my ideas, and but have ideas. And sometimes people need to be guided, but you have to be real careful how you do it. And I learned that. Can't just say, I think it should be this. You say, well, what about this? What about that? Which seems more tentative, but isn't real. And so I really try, not always perfectly, to be inclusive, but the things that I do, if I work with other people, I try to make sure they're all included and not well. And I guess I try to be a role model in some ways. I'm not always good at that. But it's one of the things about being trans is you have to make your own way a lot. You have to figure out what you want to do, who you want to be. And that takes a lot of effort. So it's really hard to not be selfish to some extent. And I know one of the classic, between my first and second therapy appointments about gender, Jenny Boylan published She's Not There, which is like the first really modern trans memoir. And I identify with so many things in that. It's so amazing. That's what my mom, 10 years later almost. And she was pretty selfish. My family sort of regards me as sort of being a selfish person, like always. Is that way? And this is just one more of that. So luckily for me, I think that's why my family's been accepted, because I've done it in other ways than gender in the past. And so it's different. It's not as different as you might think it would.
Well, Jessica, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time, for telling your story, and taking us all on this journey. I think this was really great. And I hope that people really appreciate the gem that they've received from you. So Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's wonderful. And I like telling story. It's become more of a story than I thought it was when I was looking at it. So the thing about history is that you live through history and you don't recognize it necessarily while it's happening. Sometimes you do, but not always. And over time, you start to appreciate things if you're lucky. I mean, if you're fortunate, that works. I don't know. Not everybody. That's a hard thing. But part of it is to live for history. I mean, to think forward as well as